To tell the final results of ridge augmentation in advance, most of the grafted materials are remained unabsorbed and occupying considerable portion of entire volume grafted. That's because first, there might be small amount of blood goes between the particles because they are closely clustered together to maintain the space. So the amount of bones regenerate is small. Second, the configuration of bone walls is so-called one-wall type. In other words, the size of bone wall in touch with grafted bone is relatively so small, the bones will regenerate so slowly. The blood clots far from the bone walls cannot wait and may dissolve before connective tissues grow. So the particular bones are clustered together without bone formation. On the other hand, most of the blood clots close to the bone walls become bones, and the more bones can be made if well-observable bones are grafted. So, if the whole grafts to be bones, there is no way except for the grafted material itself should be bones. However, there is no such function in any of them of the grafted materials. Even autogenous bones with osteogenesis, bone-forming activity, doesn't have that kind of function. Nevertheless, we often misunderstand the grafted materials itself could be bones because we are sometimes confusing the ridge augmentation for transplantation of the graft. The concept of transplantation is to move or change the location of intact living tissues such as organ, bone marrow, skin, hair, etc. As the examples, the organ to be transplanted has a vitality and intact internal structure, cells such as cells, small blood vessels. As the artery and vein are reconnected and blood circulation is restored, then it works. Either hair or skin to be transplanted has intact structure. If they are artificially made ones, such as artificially made heart, blood vessels, heart valve, joint, etc., it's going to be grafted because the concept of graft is to replace or complement some tissue with artificially made one which has the same structure. However, when you perform bone graft in the field of implant dentistry, we usually use an artificial processed graft materials supplied as the particle type which has no vitality or whole structure, just like the cortical and cancellous layer comprising the natural bones. Moreover, even the autogenous bone is used as the particle type gained after harvest. The block bones are crushed and ground. Therefore, all the procedure to augment bone quantity using the particle type materials is neither transplant nor graft. So, if the ridge augmentation is to be a graft, block type bone with same structure as that of natural bones should be used, no matter what, it's autogenous bone or artificial bones. But there are three must-have requirements difficult to follow. So even though autogenous particle bones are grafted, each natural, the grafted material itself cannot be bones, and also hard to expect the appearance of osteoblast because the particle type bone doesn't have vitality and structure of bone marrow. So we cannot expect independent bone regeneration far from the bone walls and only have to wait for the bone growth from the long-distance bone walls. Anyway, even if it's possible the osteogenetic activity of autogenous bone doesn't mean the grafted material itself can be bones in the first place. It's because we usually use it as particle type which doesn't have intact structure. Now, looking over about osteoinductive activity of autogenous or homogeneous particle bones, they can stimulate the bone formation at the neighboring tissue. So, it's helpful for the bone regeneration in the blood clots far from the bone walls. However, osteoinductive activity doesn't mean the grafted material itself can be bones either. Finally, looking over about osseoconductive activity, the term so-called conduction has two meanings. First, it means space maintenance as like blood clots do. So all the graft materials have this function. Second, it means that grafted material should serve as a scaffold while maintaining space. The scaffold is a temporary passage installed outward of building under construction. Equipment, machinery, materials, and workers passing through it, the building is finished. According to this meaning, when the particle type materials are grafted, enough spaces should be secured between the particles through which bones can grow, which is called the scaffold. So actually, in early stage of bone growth, the scaffolds filled up with blood clots and small blood vessels proliferate, and then the fibroblast, osteoblast migrate while the blood growth is mating. So, allogenic cancellous block bone with so much scaffolds is really osteoconductive and well-observable graft material that we can get lots of bones. And also, it becomes flexible because hard cortical is removed. So, it can be well adapted residual bone surface without voids. So, the results get better. However, it's not supplied due to the various regulations. So, even though we sometimes perform autogenous bone graft instead of usual artificial bone graft, the results at the area far from the bone walls are worse than what is expected because we usually use it as a particulate type. There is almost no scaffolds. Nevertheless, the results of autogenous bone graft is better than that of others because autogenous bones are easily observed than the others. So, thanks to dominating observability, we can take the first chance, get lots of bones during the period of regeneration, and the second chance during the period of maturation. Therefore, the most demanding function of grafted material is the observability. However, it's known even the autogenous bone is observed nearly 50% in total, and it's much lower below allogenic bones. So, if bones with low observability are grafted, the amount of bone regenerated is small, and also there is small possibility of additional bone regeneration during the period of bone maturation. That's because besides the observability, the environment for the second absorption of the remaining grafted bones is also important. If the amount of newly formed bone is smaller than the remaining grafted bones like this, the osteoclastic activity of newly formed bone is naturally weak. This phenomenon is apparent in places far from the bone walls, even though bone with hard observability is grafted. Anyway, this is the final result of ridge augmentation in general because artificial particle bones with low observability are grafted in most cases. However, the result of GBR is worse than that of rich augmentation. It's because when we perform bone GBR, we plant the fixture at the same time as bone graft. So the size of areas of bone walls touching the grafted materials gets small, and the particles in contact with only fixture wall are clustered together without bone regeneration. According to this result and the background theory, it's called as the guided bone regeneration, not the bone graft. I think that's the right, correct name. Anyway, under this condition, after performing GBR, abutment is connected and crown is fabricated, and we begin to use it. What do you think of newly made bones like this? Do you think they could withstand occlusal load as well as normal alveolar bones do? And also, a gingiva overlying newly made bone is the free gingiva, not the attached gingiva, because the gingival fibers cannot be anchored into the closed particle. So it becomes easy to get gingival inflammation. If there is inflammation, don't you think the layer with these clustered particles is easily separated from fixture and bone walls? Once the layer is separated or removed due to gingival inflammation, open spaces between the threads could be the highway of peri-implantitis. Therefore, I think it's better not to do absolutely. So, it's impossible to augment the bone width at the maxilla as well as at the mandible. But it's possible to augment the bone length only at the maxilla by performing sinus graft. However, as a matter of fact, the sinus graft is also kind of GBR, not the graft, because we still use particle-type graft materials. In other words, the graft material itself cannot be bones either, and while it's just maintaining the space, we have to wait long distance bone growth from the bone walls. Nevertheless, the reason why it's called as graft is the results are much better or better than that of GBR at least. We know it without any doubts the sinus graft is favorable of bone regeneration than the GBR. There are several reasons. First of all, the shape of sinus cavity is like a jar made of 3 big bone walls surrounded grafted bones. As you know, the more bone walls there are, the faster and the better bone regeneration we can get. 1 walls, 2 walls, 3 walls, 4 walls, right? Okay. So, the amount of quality of bone regeneration are much better than the GBR. Second, the grafted material in the sinus cavity can be easily maintained and protected thanks to the surrounding bone walls. So, it allows us to graft a relatively small amount of bones than the GBR. The grafted bones become more osseoconductive. Third, as you can see, there is not the problem of soft tissue management. So, the progress of bone regeneration is good because the grafted bones are completely isolated from the external environment in the first place. However, the final result of sinus graft are variable and depend on how to do, what to do, and where to do. It's the end for today. I'll talk about the sinus graft next time. Thank you for watching and see you